Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. My name's Sappy Sprocket and today I'm here to talk about something that has transformed my riding experience. I am of course talking about off-road riding. Now there's been a lot that I have learned since I've started taking motorbikes off-road and I'm still in that beginner phase of my journey, but there is definitely a handful of things I wish I knew before I started doing this that I really wish I knew. So yeah, without further ado, let's jump in and have a look.
This one was completely my fault.
Okay, so the first thing that I want to talk about is tyres. Tyres make all the difference in the world. I know that this is something that everybody says, it's something I hear all the time, but it isn't until you put it into practice that you really fully understand what is going on. You can have the greatest motorbike in the world, a bike that's perfect for off-roading, but if you don't have the right tyres, you're not going to get very far. Now, again, I had heard people talk about this all the time, about, what kind of tyres they use for off-roading and, knobblies, as they say. But it wasn't really until I actually started learning to do this for myself that I fully comprehended the difference. It's fine for people to explain things to you and explain why it's the case and how it works, but until you have that first-hand experience, I don't think you realise the vast difference between on and off-road tyres. These are phenomenal. I feel like no matter where I go when it comes to the trails, I just always manage to, most of the time, stay upright. Equally, they're horrendous on the road. I've been going up and down the Spanish motorways between trails and they have been an absolute nightmare. And so I'm beginning to realise, tyres make all the difference. Depending on what you're going to be doing 90% of the time is probably the kind of tyres that you want to be going for. Now, I've been really fortunate in a sense that I've had a van to do most of the motorway miles between the areas that I want to go off-roading. So in terms of, doing motorway miles, this hasn't been too much of an issue at all because I get to wheel out and do all the fun stuff. In practice for motorcycle touring, I don't really know how well it's going to be working because it's made me realise that those long distance motorway miles are probably going to have to go in the bin, but also at the same breath I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing because motorway miles suck anyway, and maybe I'll just have to learn to take life at a slower pace. So yeah, knobbly tyres really do make all the difference. It was said to me, I didn't fully understand it until I started riding, so yeah, that's something I wish I knew when I got the CB 500X, and it was naively something I didn't know. Now, item number 2, which is body position. This is something I had absolutely no clue about until I went to Motor Junkies off-road school. The concept of body positioning, it completely blew my mind. It was really difficult for me to learn because it's so counterintuitive when you've been learning to ride on the road. But basically, the best way to explain it is that everything is backwards. Rather than sitting down, you're standing up. Rather than leaning to the left, you're leaning to the right. And you kind of, not so much as ride the bike, as kind of direct the bike. I think that's the easiest way to describe it. When I'm on the road and I'm riding around and I'm going through the twisties, I feel like I'm very much riding the bike. I'm very much in sync with the bike. But when I'm off-roading, I feel like, in a sense, it's not the same kind of unit riding around. It's very much the bike is ploughing through and I'm directing the course of the bike. And it feels a little bit separated compared to on the road. And it's not necessarily a bad thing because it's a fantastic experience, but body positioning is something completely wild when you first start. It was definitely something I really struggled with. It did not feel second nature to me at all. Now, again, in the past, I had people explain to me that you need to stand up on a bike in order to keep it more stabilized when you're off-road, but I never really understood why, and I never really understood the mechanics of this. Now, when it comes to off-road riding, it's pretty much the case that you are very much using the pegs to shift the weight of the bike around, as well as the handlebars. In terms of things like going uphill, you need to shift your body weight forward. When you're going downhill, you need to shift your body weight back. And there's a lot of little tricks that I learned from Motor Junkies that really helped me perform off-road that I would have never really have necessarily learned myself, I think. And I think even if I had read about it online, I don't think I would have fully comprehended it as that actual one-to-one tuition that I got. So I'm really grateful for that. But it is something I wish I knew preferably before I even started going off-roading. But, you know, we're here, so expect the unexpected. Again, people say this all the time, but you know what? There's no substitute for experience. Something that I think was the biggest and most painful lesson for me when I was off-roading was definitely the day I went into the Pyrenees, and I started climbing the mountain. It was a bit of a drizzly day, but it wasn't too bad. And then by the time I got to the top of the mountain, I received a really awful thunderstorm warning, and I started to panic a little bit. It'd been really sunny that day, so I was pretty much dressed in this, which is just mesh clothing and a short sleeve t-shirt, and by the time I got to the mountain it was now raining. I was dressed inappropriately. I was an absolute idiot. Before I know it, I was riding through mud, and I ended up in this absolutely horrific situation where basically the mud was sloped and the bike went to throw me off to the side of the mountain, and I had to make a decision then and there whether I was going to ride off the mountain or whether I was going to crash on the left-hand side. So I chose to throw the bike on the left-hand side. That was the scenario I never expected. It was really scary at the time. I was in a lot of shock. When I did eventually get down the mountain safely, but it made me realise that when it comes to off-road riding, it's 50% chance. You can never fully anticipate what you're going to encounter. You just kind of have to do the best you can in terms of preparations. But yeah, that's definitely something I wish I learned. And I know, again, people were like, don't ride alone, blah, 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 blah. Probably will continue to ride alone. But it's definitely given me a different kind of mindset going forward in terms of, you know, taking it easy and preparing for the worst, and expect, even on a beautiful day like this, I've now thrown my raincoat in the back of the bike just in case. So yeah, expect the unexpected. Now, the next thing that I wish I knew when it came to learning to off-road on a motorbike is learning how to pick up your bike on the trails. This is so different to learning how to pick up a motorbike on the road. I've dropped my bike a million times. I've picked my bike up a million times. I'm pretty much a pro at it at this time, but it's so different when you're on the road compared to being on the trail. So when you're on the road, the vast majority of the time you are on a flat surface, and you don't really have to worry too much. A lot of the times that I've dropped my bike, it tends to be like car parks, slow speed control, and it usually tends to be when I'm getting tired. Now, when it came to being on the trail, a lot of the time that I dropped my bike on the trails was down to hesitation, the inability to commit to something once I'd made a decision. Just basically, again, it came down to that slow speed control. When you're doing off-road, you really don't want to be going too slow. I've learned that now. But one of the biggest problems with going off-road and dropping your bike off-road is that you're rarely on a flat surface. So the first 3 times that I dropped my bike on the trails, it was an absolute disaster picking it up. And my brain couldn't comprehend why suddenly a bike that I picked up a million times suddenly felt so freaking heavy. And it wasn't even just the heaviness of the bike. Sometimes the conditions were really against me. So if the handlebars falls in mud, you basically create this suction effect, which makes it a lot more difficult. If the bike falls on a hill, not only are you playing against the weight of the bike, you're playing against the weight of gravity itself. You are pretty much screwed. It was just so difficult. And I remember, I think it was the first time I came off on mud, I just sat there I don't know what to do. I can't get this bike up. It feels so much different. And I remember being just sat there staring at it what am I doing? And then suddenly from the middle of nowhere, this guy came along who was walking his dog, and he helped me pick the bike up. And he was an absolute gem. But even then, the pair of us struggled to get it up. And I was like, this isn't normal. So I ended up going back to the van that evening. I ended up doing loads and loads of research, and I finally realized that basically there is just so much going on off-road. So in terms of the position that the bike is lying in, the position of the road, the things like mud, gravel, all of that, whether you were on a ledge, a slight ledge, or step down when you dropped it, all of this stuff. And Yeah, something I really wish I had learned before that point was how to pick a bike up on the trails. And it basically revolves around like dragging the back wheel around and repositioning the bike to work in your favor. But until that point, I hadn't the fuckiest. I was pretty much screwed. So yeah, I did eventually learn that at some point, but it took a few rubbish days before I got there, and it's definitely something I really wish I knew. So if you guys are thinking about doing off-roading, I would definitely practice how to pick a bike up in rubbish conditions that aren't a road before you go ahead and do it. Now, the next thing that I wish I it's not so much that I didn't know it, I just wish I overcame it before hitting the trails, and that is the concept that momentum is your friend. It is so difficult when you're learning to do trail riding because your brain is constantly, at least my brain was constantly going, gravel, mud, steep cliffs, animals. And it takes a while for your ability to go faster and your brain's ability to comprehend the hazards ahead to synchronize. And I'm still working on this. It's still really hard for me to do. But one of the things that I found the hardest was it wasn't that I couldn't go faster, it's that my brain couldn't process the trail in front of me fast enough to make safe decisions. So when I was going downhill, one of the things you need to keep kind of doing is, especially when you're like riding on stones, you need to constantly keep planning your route. It's so difficult to do. It's like when you're learning to drive for the first time and everything feels so fast, everything's just going right by, and you're wanting to do things safely, you're wanting to process what the next steps are, but your brain physically doesn't keep up. And I don't think there's any substitute for this other than just practice and getting used to it. But I found this really difficult for me to do. It was really, really hard. I did eventually get there in the end, but yeah, it was just so difficult. I'm finally at a pace where I can ride along comfortably and process what's going on. I'm still not fast on the trails, but I definitely feel like I'm at the point where speed isn't going to be the thing that trips me up anymore. But again, it did take me quite a while to kind of get used to that. Again, I just think it's practice, and I think it's just part of learning to ride, is the fact that your brain isn't going to process what's in front of you as quickly as your body needs to act. Again, that's just learning something new. It's what it is. Now, the last thing that I wish I knew, not even before I started trail riding, I wish I knew long ago before I even started riding motorbikes, and that is gearing up is the best thing in the world. Honestly, I wish I discovered this kind of body armor from day one of motorbiking. It's not comfortable, it's really hot, it's really sweaty. It's a little bit restrictive when you have an overall jacket on top, but you don't feel anything when you come off. You don't feel anything. I bounce so well. It's so good. I really wish I had had this kind of armor at the beginning of my biking journey, and I've always tried to do my best in wearing the most appropriate gear possible. You look through all of my videos, I'm always in like my textiles, I'm always in my bike gear, and I've always, covered up as best as I can. I'm not one of these people that go around showing skin, but the absolute difference that having body armor makes to riding is phenomenal. Like, I don't feel anything when I bounce off, nothing at all. And I know the vast majority of the time it's pretty much a case of me just kind of dropping the bike and bouncing to the side, but it's so good. It's so good. It's so effective, and I really wish textile jackets came with this kind of armor inside. Yeah, that's it basically. That's something I really wish I learned before riding biking, was just armoured bodysuits are worth their weight in gold. They're really good. I don't feel anything after bouncing up. I mean, I feel a little bit sore from riding the bike, from using my muscles, but in terms of like actually just coming off, I don't feel a thing. So yeah, those are my 6 things that I wish I knew before I started trail riding. I hope some of you have found this useful. Again, I'm not a professional, I just do this for fun. I'm pretty much an idiot on a bike, learning her way around the trails day by day. But this is what I've learned so far as a new person coming into it. And I really hope that you guys found some of the life lessons I've taken away useful. And hopefully you don't make the same mistakes
as me. So yeah, until next week, my name's Sappy Sprocket. Ride safe, stay crazy, and I'll see you then. Bye.
This one was completely my fault.